My name is Maya Carson, and I'm 34 years old. I grew up in a world of privilege, private schools, luxury vacations, and a family business that was supposed to be my inheritance. I'm the CFO of Carson Technologies, the company my husband Aiden built from the ground up. But while Aiden is celebrated as a genius in tech, I've always felt like a shadow, as if my accomplishments are simply a footnote in his success. Then there's Rebecca, his ex-wife, the one who always seemed to be the golden child. They were partners before I came into the picture, and I always knew they shared something I could never touch, a bond that made me feel like an outsider. I never questioned it until now. Now, I'm sitting on a stack of signed contracts and business agreements that threaten to tear my entire life apart. I can feel the ground beneath me shaking, and it's not just the company at risk, it's my marriage. The truth is, I've never been truly seen by Aiden, and I wonder if I ever will. The one thing I'm certain of now is that everything I've worked for is hanging by a thread, and if I'm not careful, it will all come crashing down. It was just past midnight when I received the call. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, the faint hum of the city creeping through the windows, but I hardly noticed it. I was absorbed in the documents in front of me, the ones I'd stumbled upon only hours before. They were undated and signed, but real, undeniable proof that something had gone terribly wrong. The phone rang. I glanced at the screen, saw Aiden's name, and hesitated for a moment. His tone had been strained earlier that day. He'd sounded distant, apologetic, but now there was something more pressing in his voice. "Maya," he said, and it took everything in me to hear his voice, so cold, so detached. I need you to listen carefully." I stood up from the table, gripping the phone tighter as if it could somehow steady the shaking of my hands. "What's going on, Aiden?" I demanded, my voice tight, full of a mixture of anger and fear. I've given Rebecca full control of the company's new division," he said, his words stumbling out in a way that didn't sound like the Aiden I knew. She's handling the client negotiations. The deal, it's big, Maya. $12 million big. But he paused. I could hear him exhaling through the line, like a man who was already preparing for the fallout. "We lost the client. It's gone." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The name Rebecca hit me like a punch to the gut. The ex-wife, the woman who had a way of slipping effortlessly into Aiden's life, leaving me always feeling second best. And now she had what was mine, control. "Why did you give her control?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "You're telling me now? After you handed her everything, now I have to clean up the mess? You should have told me sooner, Aiden." His voice faltered. "Maya, it's not like that." "Then what is it like, Aiden?" I snapped, gripping the edge of the table to keep my balance. I don't know how to fix this without you. I need you. You're the only one who can get this client back." His words cut through the silence, full of desperation now, a tone I hadn't heard from him in years. I hung up before he could say anything else. I felt like I was suffocating. My husband, the man I trusted, had just handed everything, our business, our future, over to his ex-wife, the woman who had been out of my reach for years. And now I was supposed to come to the rescue. But there was something deeper, something darker that gnawed at the pit of my stomach, a feeling that this wasn't just a business mistake. I walked to my study, my mind racing, hands trembling as I rifled through the papers. I reached for a contract I'd found earlier and something caught my eye. A clause, one that hadn't been in the original draft, one that shouldn't have been there. It was a legal agreement that Aiden had signed with Rebecca, the terms so clearly outlined it couldn't be ignored. And it wasn't just about business. It was a clause that gave Rebecca full access to the company's assets, control over our future. I took a step back, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. The truth was, Aiden had been playing a game with me all along. I hadn't been a partner in this marriage. I had been a pawn. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 1:30 a.m., and I knew without a doubt that I had to go after this myself. This wasn't just a business issue anymore. This was my life. I couldn't wait any longer. I grabbed my coat, my fingers numb as I shoved the papers into my bag. But as I turned to leave, I heard it. A noise. The faintest whisper of footsteps behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Only the creeping shadows of the room. But something felt off. Too still. Too quiet. I reached for the door, but as I touched the handle, I heard it again. This time it was a thump, louder. Then a voice, a soft whisper, almost a breath against my ear. You should have never come here, Maya. And just like that, the door slammed shut. I didn't need to turn around to know someone was in the room with me. The next morning, the city felt distant, disconnected, as if nothing was real anymore. Aiden's betrayal was still fresh in my mind. The papers, the contract, it all seemed so calculated, like a slow burn waiting to ignite. But I had no choice. I couldn't ignore it. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, taking a deep breath. You never know who you can trust. Not even the ones closest to you. A phrase that had come to mind more times than I wanted to admit. But now, it felt more like a warning than a piece of advice. I grabbed my phone, dialing Diana. She was my one solid ally, the only one who didn't look at me like I was losing my mind. I needed her to dig deeper into the contract I'd found. Aiden's signatures, the financial discrepancies, everything. I've been looking into it, Maya. Diana's voice came through, low and urgent. You're right. There's something off. But I found something. Something bigger. I need you to meet me at the office now. My heart skipped. I didn't know if I was ready to hear what she had uncovered. But there was no backing down now. I walked into the kitchen, the weight of the morning pressing down on me. Aiden hadn't even come home last night. Not a single message. Not a call. He was avoiding me again. I needed answers. The office was silent when I arrived, the air heavy with the weight of the secret I hadn't shared with anyone. Diana was waiting at my desk, a folder open in front of her. She didn't look up as I approached. The tension was thick between us. Maya, I'm not sure you're ready for this, she said without meeting my eyes. I sat down, my hands gripping the edge of the desk. Tell me what you found, Diana. She finally looked up, her face pale. Aiden's not just involved in this deal with Rebecca. He's entirely entangled in it. But it's more than business, Maya. There's something personal. Something deeper. I felt my blood run cold. What do you mean? Diana hesitated, clearly weighing her words. The company's assets. Aiden's been moving money around, funneling it through secret accounts. I'm talking about large sums, Maya. Offshore accounts. I stood up, my pulse quickening. How much are we talking about? Millions, Maya. The numbers don't add up. But it's not just about the money. Someone's been manipulating the books. Someone inside the company. I have a name, but it's not who you'd expect. My mind raced, 1,000 possibilities flashing through my head. Who? Her voice dropped. Ethan. Aiden's old friend. He's been involved in the laundering scheme. And worse, I think he's been working with Rebecca from the start. The name hit me like a punch. Ethan. The same man who'd mysteriously disappeared months ago. The man Aiden swore he had nothing to do with. The man I thought had no part in any of this. But it made sense, didn't it? Ethan had always been close to Aiden. He was the one who'd helped fund the initial rise of the company. And now he was at the center of the conspiracy. Where is he now? I asked, already knowing the answer. Diana hesitated, shaking her head. We don't know. But I'm telling you, Maya, he's more dangerous than you think. He's not just hiding, he's involved in something far bigger than the business. I turned away from her, feeling the walls closing in. I need to find him. I need to get to him before Aiden or Rebecca do. Diana's voice was calm but firm. Be careful, Maya. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Ethan doesn't just want the company, he wants control. And that means he won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to keep things hidden. I nodded, my mind already turning over the possibilities. If I could find Ethan, if I could confront him, Maybe I could finally get to the bottom of this mess. Maybe I could expose Aiden's lies and take back what was mine. But I knew it wouldn't be that easy. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep this went. This wasn't just about money, it was about power. And power? That was the most dangerous game of all. As I made my way out of the office, I felt the unmistakable prickle of being watched. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, a constant awareness of eyes on me, even though no one was there. The air felt thick with danger. I reached my car and paused, scanning the street. A figure stood in the shadows across the street, their gaze fixed on me. I couldn't make out their face, but the feeling of being followed was too strong to ignore. I slid into the car, locking the doors with a quick click. As I started the engine, I could see the figure step into the street. A man. His face was still hidden, but his posture was too stiff, too purposeful. I stepped on the gas, but my heart pounded in my chest as I took off. I wasn't sure if I was just paranoid, but something told me that the closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous things would become. By the time I reached home, it was already dark. The house was eerily quiet, just like it had been the night before. I walked inside, but before I could even put down my bag, the phone rang again. This time, the number was unknown. I hesitated before answering. Hello. A voice on the other end was low, almost playful. I see you've been busy, Maya. You're getting closer, but you won't like what you find. I suggest you stop while you still can. I felt a chill run down my spine. My hand clenched the phone tightly as the voice continued. Aiden's not who you think he is, and neither is Rebecca. Trust no one. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, frozen. Then, with a sinking feeling in my gut, I realized I was not alone anymore. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the shock of Ethan's name hanging in the air. It was the feeling that I was a pawn in a game that was way bigger than I ever imagined. Ethan, the one who vanished months ago, leaving behind questions and whispers. The one who Aiden always said had nothing to do with the business anymore. And yet, here he was, at the center of a scheme that made my blood run cold. I couldn't waste time dwelling on it. If I had any hope of salvaging what little was left of my life, I had to act. Now, Diana's face was taut with concern as I grabbed the folder she handed me. Maya, she said, her voice a warning. You're playing with fire. Be careful. Ethan's dangerous. Dangerous? That was an understatement. I wasn't sure what had happened to Ethan or where he'd gone, but the truth was clearer than ever. He was part of this mess, and I needed to find him before Aiden or Rebecca did. I drove through the city with my mind racing, turning over every possible scenario. Was Aiden in on everything from the start? Had he and Rebecca been planning this for months, or was Ethan pulling the strings from behind the scenes? But I couldn't get too lost in the questions. I had a lead. Ethan was hiding, and I was going to find him. It was the only chance I had to get answers. I arrived at the address Diana had given me, a small, run-down apartment building on the edge of the city. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as I stepped out of the car. The building was too quiet, the air too still. Something didn't feel right. I checked my phone again. No messages from Aiden. He had been strangely distant all day. It didn't take a genius to see that something was off. But that didn't matter now. My focus was on Ethan. I walked up the creaky stairs, the old wood groaning under my weight. The hallway smelled of mildew and dust. I reached apartment 312. The door was cracked open, and I could see a faint light inside. I knocked once, but the door creaked open with a force of its own. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, and a single lamp illuminated the room in a harsh yellow glow. Maya. A voice echoed from the darkness. I froze. I knew that voice. It was Ethan. I stepped into the room, cautiously, my pulse hammering in my chest. There he was, sitting in the corner, his face half-shadowed. Ethan, my voice barely rose above a whisper. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or terrified. His eyes were cold, calculating. You look just like I remember, he said with a smirk. I guess we have a lot to catch up on, don't we? I stepped forward, refusing to show my fear. I need answers, Ethan. Where is Aiden? Where is Rebecca? What's going on? Why the hell is my husband involved in all of this? Ethan leaned back in his chair, his hands folded in front of him like he was considering how best to answer. You're way too deep, Maya. Too deep to get out now. I gritted my teeth. What's that supposed to mean? The truth? Aiden's in deeper than you realize, he said, his voice slow, deliberate. He didn't just give Rebecca control of the company for fun. He's using her, using you. All of you are just pieces on the board. But the game, Maya, it's much bigger than you think. I swallowed hard. What game? What's really going on? Ethan let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. You're not ready for the whole truth, but I'll give you a taste. The company? It's just a cover. Aiden and Rebecca? They're working for someone else. Someone you don't want to cross. I felt the blood drain from my face. Who? I demanded, my voice rising. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up slowly, moving toward a small cabinet in the corner. He opened it and pulled out a briefcase. My heart raced as he walked over and dropped it on the table in front of me. Open it, he said, his voice quiet, cold. My hands shook as I unlatched the briefcase. Inside there were files, more contracts, accounts, and a few pieces of paper that seemed far more incriminating than anything I had seen before. I flipped through the files, each one more disturbing than the last. They were full of illegal transactions, wire transfers, shell companies, and high-level connections to people who didn't exist. I stopped at one particular document, a bank transfer receipt, showing a huge amount of money wired to an offshore account. The name on the receipt was unfamiliar, but the date was less than a week ago. Where did this money come from? I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan leaned in, his face suddenly more serious. It's not the money that's the problem, Maya. It's who's behind all of this. The person who's been pulling the strings. The one who's been keeping Aiden and Rebecca in check. He paused, watching me closely. You don't know who you're dealing with. Before I could ask any more questions, a loud bang echoed from the hallway. I turned quickly, panic surging through me. Who's there? I whispered, but Ethan was already moving. Get down, he hissed. The door slammed open just as I ducked behind the table. A figure entered the room, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat. I couldn't see his face, but the shadow of the gun he held was unmistakable. Maya, the voice growled, low and threatening. You're not supposed to be here. I froze. My heart pounded, but I knew better than to panic. There was no way I was leaving without answers. The tension in the room was suffocating. I had to make a choice, fight or run. But the truth was, I didn't think I had much of a choice at all. I was almost halfway to the door when the figure in the shadows stepped forward. The tension in the room shifted like a weight pressing down on me. Don't even think about it. The man's voice was cold, threatening. My heart pounded, and I instinctively reached for the gun tucked in the back of my waistband. But the figure, taller than me, stepped closer, a gleam in his eyes that suggested he knew exactly what I was about to do. I froze, my fingers still resting on the handle of the weapon. If I drew it now, he would have me dead to rights. Who the hell are you? I demanded, my voice low but steady. I couldn't afford to show fear. Fear was weakness, and I couldn't afford to be weak anymore. I'm the one who'll make sure you don't walk out of here with any answers. He moved into the dim light, and I saw his face. Aiden's former business partner, the one who disappeared months ago, leaving no trace. The one who'd never been fully explained. Jonah. You. I couldn't finish the sentence. Jonah was a ghost, a piece of Aiden's past that I'd hoped would remain buried. But here he was, standing in front of me, like he was pulling the strings of a puppet show I didn't even know I was part of. I should have killed you when I had the chance. His words were chilling, calm, almost amused. I didn't flinch. Instead, I took a step forward, trying to regain the little control I had left. "What's your game, Jonah? What do you want with me?" Jonah smiled. "You're smarter than you look. But you're still too naive to see the big picture. Aiden's been a fool. He handed everything over to Rebecca because he thought he could control her. But Rebecca, she has plans of her own." He took a step back, his hand moving toward his pocket. My heart raced. I knew what that motion meant, the gun. Before I could react, the door burst open. Diana. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood a few of Jonah's men, towering figures in dark suits, their eyes cold, calculating. "Get down!" Diana shouted, pushing me toward the ground. A bullet ricocheted off the wall, just inches from my face. The room exploded in chaos. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed Diana's arm, pulling her to the floor behind the table. The men in suits were already coming for us, their footsteps heavy and purposeful. I could hear Jonah's voice from across the room. "It's over, Maya. You've been chasing shadows. The game is done." I could barely breathe as I tried to steady myself. Diana was shaking beside me. "Maya, we need to get out of here. Now." The men were getting closer, their footsteps echoing in the silence between the shots. I glanced toward the back door. It was the only way out. "We can make it," I said, gripping her wrist. Diana didn't argue. We both scrambled toward the door, but just as I was about to reach the handle, a hand clamped down on my shoulder, spinning me around. "Jonah." I didn't hesitate. My knee drove into his gut, and I pushed him back, taking the chance to yank the door open. We were both out in the alley in seconds, gasping for air. But the cold reality was starting to set in. Jonah's words were ringing in my ears. "The game is done." What did he mean by that? What had I gotten myself into? The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance, but I didn't feel safe yet. I needed to know where Aiden was, what he was hiding. I turned to Diana, her face pale. "We need to find out what Jonah meant." "What's happening, Diana? Who's pulling the strings?" She swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously. "I think I know who it is, but you won't believe me." I gripped her shoulders, desperate for answers. "Tell me, now." Diana hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the street as if looking for any signs of danger. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. "It's Aiden's father." I stepped back as if I'd been slapped. "What? No, that's impossible. Aiden never mentioned anything about his father. Not like this." Diana nodded, her voice strained. "I thought the same, but I've been digging, and I found a connection, a series of investments and partnerships that trace back to him. Your father-in-law's been laundering money through the company for years. Aiden's been covering it up, and Rebecca's been playing along, just waiting for the right time." My mind was reeling. Aiden's father? The man who'd been in the background, barely acknowledged in Aiden's world? Was he the one pulling the strings behind the scenes? But why? What was the endgame? The sound of tires screeching suddenly cut through the tension. A black SUV rounded the corner and skidded to a stop right in front of us. The door flung open. I didn't even think. I grabbed Diana's hand and yanked her toward the alley. But it was too late. A man stepped out of the SUV, tall, with a gun trained on us. His face was obscured by the shadows, but his stance was confident. "Jonah's men. I think it's time for you to come with us," the man said, his voice as cold as steel. There was no time to run. No way out. I reached for the gun, hidden in my jacket. But then the man spoke again, his tone softer this time, almost like he was trying to get through to me. "I don't want to do this, Maya, but you're in over your head. This is bigger than you realize." I had no choice. I fired. A shot rang out, and in that moment, everything seemed to stop. For a heartbeat, everything was quiet. The world was suspended. Then the man crumpled, falling backward into the street. I turned to Diana, my chest heaving. "Let's go. Now." We ran, but I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The game had changed, and I was just getting started. I could still hear the gunshot echoing in my mind, sharp and sudden. But as we sprinted down the alley, my pulse pounding with each step, I couldn't afford to dwell on the blood that had spilled. I had to stay focused. I had to find the truth before it consumed me completely. The world outside was still, too still. The streets were empty, save for the occasional car speeding by, headlights blurring the lines between shadows and reality. Diana was silent beside me, her eyes darting from side to side. She knew, just as I did, that we weren't safe. Not anymore. The black SUV that had nearly trapped us earlier was still parked at the end of the street, its dark windows reflecting the dim light of the street lamps. My heart skipped a beat. They were watching. They knew we were coming. "We need to go somewhere safe," Diana muttered, breaking the silence. "They're going to come for us." I shook my head, determination setting in. "No, I'm not running anymore. I need to understand what's happening. I need to know who's behind this." Diana's face twisted with a mix of fear and confusion. "I told you, Aiden's father, Maya. He's been behind everything. Aiden's in too deep. They're all in on it. Rebecca, Jonah, Aiden." I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. But the pieces were falling into place too perfectly. I thought I knew Aiden. But now, I had no idea who he really was anymore. The man I married, the man I trusted, had been hiding secrets from me, and now they were threatening to destroy everything. If what you're saying is true, then why hasn't Aiden told me? I asked, my voice tight with the weight of my frustration. Diana hesitated before answering. "He doesn't have a choice, Maya. You think he's in control? No. He's been manipulated, just like you. Aiden's father has been pulling his strings for years." I clenched my fists. I don't care about his father. I care about Aiden. If he's in trouble, I need to help him. But first, we need to stop Jonah. We need to find him before it's too late. We reached my car, but as I opened the door, I stopped. The cold air felt suffocating, the weight of the situation sinking in. "Diana, you said Aiden's father's been laundering money through the company. How do we stop him?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, her eyes flickered to the back seat of the car, where a small envelope was lying on the seat. My stomach twisted. "What is that?" I asked, reaching for the envelope. Diana stepped forward, her hand on my arm. "Maya, no, don't open it." But it was too late. I tore it open, and what I found inside made my blood run cold. A death threat. A single line written in bold, red ink. "If you don't stop, you won't make it out alive." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The words felt like a weight on my chest. "They're going to kill us," Diana whispered, her voice barely audible. "We're too deep in this." "No," I snapped, my mind racing. "This isn't just about us. This is bigger than us. Aiden. He's too close to the edge. We need to stop this. Now." The night passed in a blur of darkness and tension. Diana and I drove in silence, both of us lost in our thoughts, each of us contemplating the danger that was closing in. My mind kept replaying Jonah's words. "You've been chasing shadows." He was right. I had been chasing shadows, unable to see the real picture. But now I was starting to understand. The money laundering, the shell companies, the hidden deals. It was all part of something much bigger. I was no longer just fighting for answers. I was fighting for my life. We arrived at a nondescript office building on the outskirts of the city. Diana handed me a small key card as we stepped out of the car. "This is it," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "Everything we need to know is inside." I took a deep breath before following her inside. The air was stale, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. It was too quiet, too empty. Diana led me down a narrow hallway to a door at the end. She slid the key card through the reader, and the door clicked open. Inside was a small, dimly lit room, filled with files, computers, and hidden safes. "This is where Aiden's father keeps everything," Diana said, her voice barely above a whisper. The real proof. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the room. There, on the desk, was a file labeled in bold letters. Operation Final Phase. I reached for the file, the weight of its contents pressing down on me. As I opened it, my fingers froze. The documents inside weren't just about money. They were about Aiden. They were about me. I pulled out a series of photos. Aiden and his father, laughing together at a family gathering. Then a shot of me, taken without my knowledge, at a company event. The next photo was of Rebecca, standing close to Aiden, their faces so close they might as well have been lovers. The last photo made my stomach drop. It was Jonah, standing next to Aiden's father, shaking hands. What is this? I whispered. Diana's voice cracked. It's not just the company they want, Maya. It's you. All of it. Aiden, Rebecca, Jonah. They're using you as leverage. You're the final piece. I stumbled back, the truth hitting me like a freight train. They hadn't been manipulating just Aiden. They had been manipulating me all along. I had been the key. And now I was the target. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Someone was coming. I turned to Diana. We need to get out. Now. But as I moved toward the door, I saw him. Aiden. His face was pale, his eyes wild with panic. Maya, we need to talk. Now. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about saving the company anymore. It was about saving myself. And Aiden? I wasn't sure if I could save him too. The weight of the truth hit me like a freight train. Aiden's father, Jonah. They were all pieces of a game I never agreed to play. But somehow I was in it. No one had prepared me for this, least of all myself. Aiden stood in front of me, his face drained of color, his eyes wide with panic. He looked like a man on the verge of losing everything. The world around us felt like it was closing in, the walls of the room closing tighter with each passing second. Maya, you don't understand. Aiden's voice trembled, his hands reaching out toward me. But I stepped back, the distance between us growing. He was still the man I loved, but in that moment he was a stranger. I didn't want this. I didn't want to drag you into this. You didn't want this? I snapped, my voice harsh, cutting through the tension like a knife. You handed the business over to your ex-wife. You let him, your father, pull the strings, and you dragged me into this without a second thought. You've been lying to me, Aiden. All this time. He flinched, but there was no apology, no remorse in his eyes. Just fear. Fear of losing control. Please, he begged, voice soft. You don't understand. It's bigger than you think. I was trying to protect you. I thought I could handle it, but it got out of hand. My father, Rebecca, they wanted everything, and they were using me to get it. It was the truth, but it wasn't enough. You don't get it, do you, Aiden? I said, my voice barely a whisper. You've been letting them use you like a pawn, and now they're coming for everything. I couldn't do this anymore. There was no more room for secrets between us. I had to finish this for both of us. For me. The truth, that damned, unrelenting truth, had finally spilled out. Aiden wasn't the mastermind here. Neither was Rebecca. Neither was Jonah. They were all just players in a much larger game. I stepped away from him, moving toward the window. The city stretched out below me, its cold steel and glass towers rising up like silent giants, indifferent to the chaos of my world. I couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment, the way everything I'd built and loved was slipping through my fingers. My marriage, my career, everything was a lie. Then the phone buzzed. It was a message from Diana. They're coming for you. My heart stopped. It was too late. The message was a warning, one I should have seen coming. But I was too caught up in the whirlwind of betrayal to pay attention to the danger that was closing in on me. Aiden, I said, my voice low but resolute. They know we're onto them. Your father's already set things in motion. I turned back to face him, my eyes hard with resolve. I'm getting the proof. We're going to expose them. But you, Aiden, you're on your own now. You'll have to face your father. He looked at me, his face filled with a mixture of fear and something else I couldn't name. Regret, maybe. But it was too late for that. There was no going back. I'm sorry, Maya, he whispered. But the words meant nothing now. Sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't erase the lies. Sorry didn't undo what had been done. I grabbed the file on the desk, the one that had started this nightmare, and I stormed out of the room. I had one chance to get the evidence, and I wasn't going to let Aiden's apologies stand in my way. The streets were alive with the usual noise. Cars honking, people walking, the hum of the city moving like an unfeeling beast. But today it felt different. It felt like everyone was watching, waiting. Watching me. I got into the car, the engine starting with a sharp roar. My hands were cold on the steering wheel, my pulse thumping in my ears. The reality of what I was about to do hit me all at once. I was about to tear everything down. The company, the family, the lies. And I couldn't afford to be wrong. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Jonah. The message was short. A threat. You're not the only one with secrets, Maya. I felt the pit of my stomach drop. This wasn't just about Aiden anymore. This was about survival. I sped through the streets, the cold rush of wind in my face, but it didn't help with the suffocating feeling in my chest. The truth was out there now, and whether I liked it or not, there was no turning back. I reached the office. The building stood in front of me, dark and imposing, like a beast with its fangs bared. The final showdown was about to begin. I didn't hesitate. I walked in, the door slamming behind me. Jonah's men were waiting, and in that moment everything slowed down. The tension in the air was palpable. Every second stretched on forever. Jonah stood in front of me, his face still shadowed, but his grin unmistakable. You really think you can win this, Maya? He asked, his voice calm, taunting. I didn't answer. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the file. The proof. The irrefutable evidence that would destroy them all. Jonah's eyes narrowed. It's too late for this. But I knew better. In the moment of truth, it wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about saving Aiden or even myself. It was about taking control. The truth always comes out. It's just a matter of when. The next few days were a blur. The authorities came in, arresting Aiden's father, Jonah, and the others. The business collapsed under the weight of the scandal. But in the end, I walked away with the only thing that mattered, my freedom. Aiden tried to reach out to me. I didn't respond. He was lost in his own lies, tangled in his father's web. I couldn't save him anymore. Sometimes we let our own fears drive us to do things we regret. Sometimes we build our own prisons. But in the end, we all have to choose which side we're on. I chose mine, and that was all that mattered. As I sat by the window, watching the city stretch out before me, I knew one thing for sure. The truth had set me free. But it had also shown me something else. Sometimes the biggest battle we fight is the one against our own choices. And I was finally ready to face that battle.